Hello and welcome to Cinema 4D Lite Release 21. My name is Athanasios Pozantsis, aka Noseman, and in this video I will teach you how to create a cel-shaded logo animation with a toony look inside Cinema 4D Lite Release 21 and then import it in After Effects using the Cineware plugin. So this is the final composition. And as you can see, it's comprised of a pre-comp that has all the splashes. Let me turn off the script logo. We only have the splashes there. We're not going to deal with this in this tutorial. And then we created this right on nice toony play using Cinema 4D Lite Release 21. And of course we have a background. So let's go and delete this from our layer stack, and let's delete it from here as well. The actual project file is going to be available for download. Now, how do we launch Cinema 4D Lite? Well, that's pretty simple. Go to the File, New, Maxon Cinema 4D File. Go to the appropriate folder, whichever folder you want to, and just write a name and press Save. And that is sufficient to launch Cinema 4D Lite. So let's begin by drawing the splines in our viewport. We are currently viewing the perspective view. I want to go and view this from the front view. So go to this button here, click once to go to the 4 views, and you can see each and every one of these panels has another set of these buttons. And the one we want is the front, and I'm going to click on the appropriate 4th button and maximize the front view. And now I'm going to draw some splines in a very similar fashion to Adobe Illustrator or After Effects when we're drawing paths. So click and hold this and you can see a whole list of different spline objects. We are going to select the spline pen. And let's start drawing our splines. So let's draw a P in a very similar fashion to the way you're used to in any other Adobe product. There we go. I'm just clicking and dragging to draw the splines, and I'm going to accelerate this so we don't lose any time. When you're done drawing a specific segment, just press Escape on your keyboard a couple of times, and this will release the Bezier tool so you can continue doing more splines. So let's continue with the A. Press Escape a couple of times, and let's do the line. And escape a couple of times. Excellent. So now we have 3 spline objects in the Object Manager. Let's go and rename these so we know what exactly each spline represents. Double click on the name and let's write PL. Press Enter. Double click on the name AY. Enter. Double click and let's call this line and press Enter. What I'm going to do is just put them in the right order, just so that it's easy for me to understand what begins and what ends. PLAY line. Now, if you want to go and do some editing to these splines, you need to select the appropriate spline, make sure that this little button here, which is called Use Point Mode, is enabled. Because if this is enabled, then you actually edit the object as a whole, whereas this one allows you to go to each component, like the points. In this case, we want to adjust the points. And go to the Move tool, this little cross here. And now, what you can do is hover over the point you want to edit, click once, and then you can drag anywhere to move it, or go to the control vertices and change the Bezier curve. And let me go and do this for a few points and just make this look a bit better. So don't forget, click and then click and drag and move it around and click and drag on these to adjust them. Whenever you're done with a particular spline, just go to the Object Manager, select the other one, and continue the same way. And I think I'm happy with the state of my splines at this moment. I can adjust it further if I wish later on. So now let's go and click on this. So we're in the model mode. Excellent. Now these particular splines now are visible in this flat front panel. Let's go and view them in the 3D world. So click on this to minimize and click on this to maximize the perspective view. So I'm going to use a few navigation shortcuts now. If I press and hold number 1 on my keyboard and click my left mouse button and drag, I can pan the camera left and right, up and down. If I press and hold 2, I will dolly in and out where I click and drag my mouse. Again, pressing the left mouse button. And if I press and hold 3 and click and drag my left mouse button, I can tumble my camera around. So by using 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard, I can actually navigate to get a view of this little logo from a specific perspective I want to. Fantastic. So I've framed my logo the way I want it, and let's go and see how this looks when rendered. Go and click this button to render in the viewport. And of course, nothing happens because by definition, splines do not render. We need to generate geometry in order for them to become visible. For this to happen, we need a generator. So go click on this and hold, and go and select a sweep generator. And I'm going to start with the line, which is the simpler of all shapes. In order for the sweep to do something, to generate something, it needs 2 components. It needs the actual line, and I drag the line in the object manager and pull it over the generator until I see that arrow pointing downwards. And now the line is a child of the sweep. We need one more component, and that is the profile. And for a profile, I'm going to use a circle. So go here, click and hold, generate a circle, and then drag the circle between the sweep and the line until the arrow points to the left. This is going to make it a child of the sweep and a sibling of the line. So these two now are at the same hierarchical level. This is a hierarchy with a parent and 2 children. Now you can see the circle is too big. So if you select the circle and go down here to the Attributes Manager and select the Object tab, you can see that the circle has a radius. By changing the radius, by clicking on the arrows up and down, I can make this the thickness I want it to be. Fantastic. Now another thing you can do here is change the resolution of your mesh to get a smoother surface if required. Now I can't see any geometry here, so I need to go to the display menu of my viewport and select Gouraud Shading Lines. The lines will show you the geometry. Let me navigate in here using my shortcuts, and you can see that some of these segments are shorter and some are longer. It depends on how curved this is. This is what we call an adaptive spline. So go select the line and go to the Object tab, and down here where it says Intermediate Points, Adaptive, let's change this to Uniform and increase the number to 15, and we have a denser mesh which is going to render smoother. Fantastic. The other thing I want to do is not have a constant thickness on this line. I want this to be thinner on the edges and thicker in the middle, and I want to be able to art direct that. In order to do that, go select the actual generator, and in the Object tab, I'm going to bring this a bit further up so we have a bit more space down here. Go down here and twirl open this little arrow which says Details. And here we have 2 components, the scale and the rotation. This controls the scaling over the distance of the spline. If I drag this little thingy, you can see now that we have a thin spline on this side where the spline begins and a thick one on that side where the spline ends. And I can go and add points here to sculpt this. If I press Command or Control and click on the spline itself, it adds a point. And I can move this around and play with the Bezier points to make this look any way I want. Fantastic. So I can drag this down. I can grab this and pull it up. And you can see I'm creating that tapered shape. I'll pull this up a bit, and then I'm going to go to the end, make it a bit thinner. Command or Control click to add a point, bring this down, and do that. So now I've sculpted this spline to look any way I want. If you want these edges to be a bit smoother, all you have to do is go to the line and increase the number of segments. Fantastic. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to Line Sweep by double-clicking on the name, adding the line and pressing Enter. And now I'm going to repeat the same things on the other 2 splines. Now I don't want to do everything from the beginning again and again. So I'm going to use this line sweep. So I'm going to make a copy of it. Click and hold and drag down here. Don't release the mouse. Press Command or Control until you see that little arrow. And if I release my mouse now, you will see I made a copy of the line sweep. I'm going to select the line, because we already have that, delete it, and drag the PL down here until I see the arrow pointing to the left. And I've created another sweep generator that has the same profile but a different spline. And now I can rename this to PL sweep. I can delete this and press enter. Now let me navigate out. You can see it's retained all the thickness and all the sculpting I've done. What it hasn't retained is the parameters of the spline. So select the spline, go to uniform, and let's make this 20. And you can adjust that as you wish. I'm going to do the same thing for the last spline. Excellent. So now I can go to each one of these splines and sculpt them in a way where I'll get the thickness where I want it and make them thin where I want them, just by selecting it, going down to the details, and I'm going to start adding, subtracting points, moving them around until I get my desired shape. And I'm done with the shape sculpting. Now you can see that we have these overlaps here. If I go closer, you will see that the spline, because it's generated on a two-dimensional world, that front view we had, is folding over itself. But we have the ability, because we are in a real 3D program, to move points in and out as well to avoid these overlaps. Let's go and start with a PL. I'm going to go to my PL spline, make sure that my points mode is enabled. And because I can't see the spline because it's inside the geometry, there are a couple of things I can do. One is temporarily deactivate the generator by clicking on the little tick mark. I can select the point I want to adjust and then activate it again to see how it looks. Or what I can do is minimize my viewport, adjust my view in my perspective so I see the components I'm working on, and use one of the two-dimensional views to do my selections. So with your Move tool selected and Points mode, let's go here and start selecting points and moving them around. The way I'm moving them is by hovering over these arrows, so I constrain their movement in the particular direction. So if I go here and hover over the blue arrow and click and drag, I'm moving it in the Z direction. And you can see how it changes in the rest of the view, so you have a good idea of what's going on. Let me continue here quickly so I get this all done. Whenever you're ready to move to another spline, just go and select that spline and continue appropriately. And I think I've resolved most of my overlaps. Let me maximize my perspective view and let me frame my logo. Fantastic. So now that we're done with the main modeling, let's proceed to the animation. I want this to write on. How do I do that? Well, this particular sweep generator has a parameter if I select it, and now we don't need the details anymore. So let's just close that little panel. You will see in the Object tab we have the end growth, and currently it's set at 100%. Now let's go over these arrows, click and hold and drag up and down, and you can see that this controls the percentage of the object that's going to be generated over the length of the spline. That's fantastic, because if I animate this, I'll make it seem as if it's drawing on. So I want to go and set all these to 0. So end growth 0, select the other one, double click, type 0 and press enter, select this one, double click, 0, press enter. So now there's nothing written on our screen. So let's begin with the PL. Select the PL sweep, and let's go and add a keyframe at frame 0, and this little blue square indicates which frame we're on. You can click anywhere in the timeline to control, and you can even scrub it. So let's put it on 0, and let's go here at the end growth, and there's a circle on the left. That is the keyframe circle. Now click once, and now that red dot indicates that we have the value of 0 on the end growth at frame 0. Let me go to frame 30, and let me set this to 100%. Double click 100, press enter, and then add one more keyframe. In After Effects, keyframes are set automatically when you change a value. In Cinema 4D, there is a mode to do that, but by default, we have to move our playhead to the appropriate frame, then change the value, and then manually set the keyframe button. So let's go and see what happens if I rewind and press play. And we have the writing on of PL. Rewind, press play. Fantastic. Let's apply the same thing at different times to the rest of the word. Let's go back to frame 30. Let's go to AY, set a keyframe for 0. Let's advance about 30 frames. At frame 60, let's set this to 100%, press enter, and add a keyframe. Rewind, check our animation, PL, AY, fantastic. Let's do the same thing for the line. Go here, go to frame 60, go add a 0% value at the end growth keyframe. Let's advance a bit less this time. Let's go 15 frames or something like that. There you go, 75. And let's set this to 100% and add the keyframe. And what I'm going to do is extend my animation so we have a few seconds of hold. So go here, which is the end of our timeline, double click and type 150, press enter. And now if you go and extend this all the way to the end, now we have a full duration of 150 frames. Rewind, press play, and we are writing on play. Fantastic. And then it's holding for the rest of the time. And that's it. We're done with the animation. If at any point you wish to change the timing, the speed, or the position of the animation, it's not that difficult. Select any object you wish that has any animation. Find that animated parameter, the one with the dot, right-click on the name, and in the animation submenu, go down here where it says Show Track. This will bring up a very detailed timeline. Let me just bring it over here. And the particular parameter is going to show us the keyframes, the first one which is 0% and the last one which is 100%. With that parameter selected, this orange bar here allows us to either click and drag and change when the animation is going to occur, so we're moving it in time, or go to the ends and you can speed it up or slow it down. And it's as simple as that. Close this and all the changes will take effect. Rewind, press play, let's make sure everything is fine, and I think I'm happy with what I'm seeing. I think it's time to move to the look. Let's add some color. Let's make this look like a toon. So this is going to render. And if I render this now, it looks smooth, like cream, let's say. We want to control the lighting, and we want to create a toony look to it. I don't want any gradients here. I want this to have some nice, hard colors. So first of all, in order to be able to view the rendered version in our viewport, I'm going to go and activate, click and hold this little button, and let's activate the interactive render region. Release and get this little rectangle. Now you can use these dots to place it where you want. Just click and drag. This little arrow, the smallest arrow in the universe, is used for quality. If I click and drag it upwards, I'm going to get maximum quality. And then if you right click on that little arrow, we're going to set alpha mode. That's very convenient because actually it's a rendering but cutting out the alpha so we can see the background. So let me deselect everything, and this is the rendered version. So we are going to create a material, and we are going to apply that material on our logo to look like a toon. So go down here to the Material Manager, click on Create, Materials, and New Standard Material. This is a material. Let's drop it on our object. Click and drag, and let's drag it on the line sweep. There are other ways of dragging it on an object. You click and drag and you drag it on the object itself. You can see the color changes. And let's drag this one here. It makes no difference. Just make sure you drag it on the name. And we've got these texture tags that indicate that that object has this material. Now we need to change this material to reflect our look. And first of all, I'm going to double click on the material, and I get the material editor. I'll pull it here to the side so we can see everything together. Let's name this Toony and press enter, just so that we know what's going on. Now I'm going to turn off the color and the reflectance, and I'm going to turn on the luminance, which provides us with flat shading. And now I want to control this flat shading using lights. Go to the texture right here, click on this little arrow, go down and bring up from the effects the Lumus shader. Now again, it's going to look like a shiny cream or something like that. The Lumus shader is a very powerful shader, and don't ask too many details here. We don't have the time to deal with it. There are plenty of tutorials on Cineversity that will give you all the ins and outs of the Lumus. Click once on this icon, and let's do the following. Select Specular 1, deactivate, Specular 2, deactivate, and Specular 3, deactivate. And you can see everything reflects in our render. Let's go to the shader, and let's twirl open the color and make it fully white. Then change the illumination to 100%. And there we go. We have the basis for our Toon shader. Now, what I want to do is, first of all, make this shading. You can see darker shades and lighter shades. This is a gradient, essentially. The lighter shades being white and the darker shades being black. I want to be able to remap these to any colors I want. So click on the luminance, and with the luminance already in the little texture, click on the arrow once more and select the colorizer. This will adapt whatever is inside it. So now it says colorizer. Click on this. The luminance is, as we say, inside the colorizer. And the colorizer takes the luminance values that the Lumus generates and maps them on a gradient. So if I drag this over here, you will see that I'm actually condensing my gradient. And what I'm going to do is click on this and then shift click on this to select both knots. Untwirl this, and I can see all the parameters of the knots. Select the interpolation and set it to step. Now, if you can't see the gradient, just move your mouse over here and expand it a bit. So now we can see the whole gradient. Just click on one. Let's pull this to the other side. And now the white one has a hard cut. So this is a very sharp gradient. And look at that. I can actually control this any way I want. So if I bring this here, I'm actually creating the highlight. So let's go and add some color. I'm going to click here and add a knot. And I'm going to make this knot this color. Fantastic. Let me just make it a bit redder and a bit more desaturated. Excellent. I'm going to select this and go and make it a dark saturated red so that indicates our shadows. Now this is not bad, but I have one issue. The highlight is not in the position I want it. I want it to be off on the top left. And this has nothing to do with the material. So let's close the material. We need to change the lighting. What you see here is a default light, which is very close to our camera. So go and click and hold the lighting panel and create an infinite light. With an infinite light, you shouldn't care about the position. It doesn't care about the position. It does care about rotation though, because it's a directional light. Select your rotation tool, and you can see this rotation gizmo, and make sure you click and drag inside this little sphere. Click and drag, and we're actually rotating. You can see where the direction of the light is. And release, and look at that. Now we have the lighting we want. So let's just adjust this the way we want it to. And I think that looks fantastic. We have everything we want. But no, we are lacking one more little detail. There's no shadow here. We have the shading, but we don't have the light shadow. So make sure the light is selected. Go to the General tab. And right down here you will see shadows. By default, lights do not have shadows. Click on None and set it to Ray Traced Hard. And there you go. Now we get the shadows as well. And I think that this concludes the modeling and shading of our little Play logo. So let's proceed now by first of all saving it. Let's go back to After Effects. You can see that original Play file we created is actually our Play logo. Let's drag this in our timeline. Fantastic. And let's just scrub. And we can see it. That's fantastic. Look at that. It's animating. Just click on your timeline. You can see the animation happening. But there's no color. The reason is when you insert a Cinema 4D file, and this gets inserted using the Cineware plugin, which is already installed in After Effects. And the default renderer, as you can see here, is software. And it's optimized for speed if you want to see if your animation speed is correct and so forth. I'm going to click here and set this to Standard Final. And now we get the full effect of our render. You have just created a beautiful Toony logo from scratch inside Cinema 4D Lite and composited it in After Effects. Please watch the rest of the fantastic tutorials we have on Cineversity to learn more, and thanks for watching.